It meant more to me than I can possibly express. We feel their absence at every familiar turn of the season and remember them in each cherished tradition.
At 76 years old, King Charles said he lost the real love of his life, and no crown could fix his broken heart. The night before he married Diana, he gave a bracelet to Camilla, breaking Diana's heart. Charles wears the crown now, but deep inside, he carries the pain of the girl he let go. Let us walk into the moment he wrote a letter too late and broke his own soul forever. Love in the shadows, secrets in the sunlight. King Charles's journey through love didn't start with a grand ceremony. It began with a glance, a moment so small and unremarkable that it almost slipped through history's fingers. Long before the world whispered about Diana or Camilla, Charles had already stumbled onto hidden paths, paths paved with longing, indecision, and echoes of what might have been. But one silent choice had already changed everything. The first spark appeared at Althorpe under an unassuming English sun. Charles wasn't at a royal gala or an opulent affair. He was simply visiting. Diana Spencer, just 16, shy and bright-eyed, crossed his path. Charles was 29, officially courting her older sister, Sarah. Yet, in that soft afternoon light, it wasn't Sarah who left a mark on the future king's heart. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't destiny. It was simply human, quiet, almost invisible, the kind of moment that feels weightless until it changes everything. Charles continued dating Sarah, carrying on with the duties expected of him. Yet somewhere deep, a seed had been planted, hidden beneath layers of tradition and royal obligation. It waited patiently, knowing that grief often makes the heart vulnerable. That grief struck with brutal force when Lord Louis Mountbatten, Charles's mentor, his anchor, was assassinated. The loss shook Charles to his core. Adrift and raw, he found unexpected solace in Diana's presence. She wasn't offering titles or strategic alliances. She simply saw the man behind the crown. For Charles, so accustomed to being an institution instead of an individual, that recognition cut deeper than any formal pledge could. Charles understood the rules of his world better than anyone. Love alone was not enough. Marriage demanded calculation, alliances, lineage, image. But Diana, with her warmth and sincerity, slipped past those defenses. For a fragile moment, it seemed as if love might survive the machinery of monarchy. The world remembers what came next. February 24, 1981. Their engagement was announced. Cameras flashed. Diana's shy smile lit up the frame. Charles's grin was more practiced. They looked flawless, an image curated for history books. Yet even then, tiny fractures rippled beneath the surface. When a reporter asked if they were in love, Diana, ever genuine, answered instantly, "Of course." Her voice brimmed with belief, with the bright certainty of someone who still believed fairy tales could be real. Charles blinked, paused, then replied with a chilling distance, "Whatever in love means." It was a brief exchange, barely a heartbeat, but it cracked the illusion wide open. The wedding arrived on July 29, 1981, cloaked in grandeur. St. Paul's Cathedral gleamed like a dream. Diana drifted down the aisle in a cloud of ivory silk and antique lace, carrying the hopes of an entire nation. 750 million souls watched, believing they were witnessing a modern myth take flight. But myths have a way of deceiving. Behind the regal choreography, betrayal had already left its fingerprints. The night before the wedding, Charles gifted Camilla Parker Bowles a bracelet, a small, almost dismissible object, heavy with hidden meaning. Diana discovered it. She didn't confront him. She didn't flee. She did what was expected. She smiled, she waved, and she walked toward a future already fraying at the seams. The honeymoon unfolded under Mediterranean skies aboard the royal yacht Britannia. From Egypt to Greece, they sailed through a postcard-perfect world. To outsiders, it shimmered with romance, Inside their cabins, it was a different story. Silences stretching longer, the invisible walls thickening. At Balmoral Castle, where tradition hung as heavily as the mist, reality took deeper root. Diana struggled. Isolated from her friends, surrounded by customs she neither understood nor was allowed to question, she began to wither. Charles, steeped in a life of unspoken expectations and private loyalties, felt the growing chasm but seemed helpless to bridge it. When Diana became pregnant with Prince William, the monarchy celebrated. A future king, a secured lineage. The fairy tale would continue. Yet within Diana, sorrow swelled. She felt more trapped than ever, a golden bird in a cage no one even realized they'd built. Charles tried at first in small, awkward ways. He planned outings, gave lessons on navigating palace life, shared laughter when the moment allowed. Sometimes they found a fragile kind of happiness, moments where the curtain lifted and they were just two people, not a prince and a princess, trying to love each other. But moments by nature are fleeting. The birth of Prince Harry in 1984 marked another silent fracture. Charles had hoped for a daughter, and when he let slip his disappointment, the wound it left in Diana festered. It wasn't just about a child's gender, it was about feeling unseen, unheard again. By then, the marriage was little more than a beautiful facade, an ornate frame around a crumbling portrait. Charles, fatigued by the effort, drifted back toward Camilla, whose presence had never truly vanished from his life. Camilla understood him in a way Diana never could. Or perhaps in a way Diana was never allowed to. Diana, intuitive and painfully aware, sensed every shift, every retreat. And with each new betrayal, seen or suspected, she fractured a little more. The world saw her dazzling gowns, her perfect smile. Few saw the sorrow blooming behind her eyes. In public, the couple soldiered on, shaking hands, attending galas, embodying the dream they were tasked to sell. In private, they lived as strangers sharing a gilded cage. The tragedy wasn't sudden. It was slow, inevitable, a love story hollowed out by duty, eroded by old loyalties, undone by a system that demanded perfection but punished authenticity. By the time their marriage collapsed before the world's eyes, the real heartbreak had already happened. Long before televised interviews and sensational headlines, they had each in their own lonely corners mourned the life they had once hoped to build. The dream didn't die in a single moment. It died quietly over years, with every hesitant smile, every cold silence, every night spent apart while pretending to be one. And history, always hungry for tragedy, dressed in gold, took careful note. Love, in the shadow of crowns and centuries-old expectations, rarely stands a chance. Not when duty demands more than the heart can give. Crowns crumble and hearts shatter. By 1989, the fracture between Charles and Diana was no longer a rumor. It was raw, undeniable truth. Diana had transformed. Gone was the wide-eyed teenager. In her place stood a woman of steel wrapped in silk. She was still radiant, still beloved by millions, but sorrow shadowed every public smile. The young girl who once dreamed of fairy tales had become a queen of survival, shaped and sharpened by betrayal. The breaking point came not with headlines or scandal, but across a crowded room at a birthday party. Under the glitter of chandeliers and the murmur of whispered gossip, Diana did the unthinkable. She confronted Camilla Parker Bowles. No titles, no ceremony, just two women facing a truth too heavy for crowns or traditions to conceal. Diana's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Her pain was a presence, demanding recognition. It wasn't a battle for a throne. It was a cry for dignity, for acknowledgement of all the silent wounds she had endured. The confrontation did not mend the broken seams of her marriage. If anything, it only pushed Charles further into Camilla's waiting arms. Their union, once merely strained, now crumbled openly. A tragedy unfolding in excruciating slow motion under the relentless gaze of the world's media. By 1992, the collapse could no longer be contained. private phone conversations between Charles and Camilla, soaked with intimacy and awkward longing, were leaked to the press. The scandal, branded Camilla Gate, detonated across the globe. Even Buckingham Palace, a symbol of unyielding permanence, seemed to stagger under the weight of such personal humiliation. Charles stood at the center of the storm. His carefully cultivated image, dutiful, restrained, stoic, shattered. Before the world, he was no longer just a future king. He was a man exposed, caught between the crushing expectations of duty and the desperate hunger for something real. In a televised interview meant to stabilize his crumbling reputation, Charles confessed. Yes, he had been unfaithful, but only, he insisted, after his marriage to Diana had irretrievably broken down. It was a technicality, the language of courts, not hearts. And it satisfied no one. Diana answered first with silence, and then with a fire that consumed everything in its path. In 1995, she sat before the BBC's panorama cameras, poised but unflinching. Her words were not an attack, they were a testimony. Depression, betrayal, abandonment, she laid it all bare. "There were 3 of us in this marriage," she said, her voice unwavering, "so it was a bit crowded." The monarchy, that ancient fortress built on silence and stoicism, recoiled under the force of her truth. Wars, revolutions, abdications, the House of Windsor had weathered them all. But this was different. This was personal. This was a woman adored by millions, turning the machinery of modern media against the very institution that had tried to shape her. By December 1992, the facade had disintegrated beyond repair. Prime Minister John Major stood before Parliament, solemn, to announce the formal separation of Charles and Diana. It was not a divorce, not yet. But the dream was over. The myth had crumbled. Yet, for a flickering instant, hope stubbornly clung to life. In May 1993, during the 50th anniversary of the Battle of the Atlantic, Charles and Diana appeared together on the royal yacht Britannia. They laughed, they smiled, they moved together with a grace that fooled even the wary. It was easy to imagine for a heartbeat that redemption was possible. But appearances are deceiving. Healing requires more than curated smiles. Behind closed doors, the divide yawned wider. Diana threw herself into her humanitarian work with ferocious devotion, visiting immune virus patients when fear kept others away, walking through landmine fields, comforting the forgotten and the discarded. Her pain became her purpose. Her compassion lit up the darkest corners of the world, even as the darkness within her grew heavier. Charles, meanwhile, clung to the armor of royal duty. State visits, formal dinners, endless ribbon cuttings. His life became a script from which he could not deviate. Whatever warmth remained within him was hidden behind protocols and centuries of expectation. His heart, once strained, now seemed entirely out of reach. The negotiations for their divorce were savage, fought with the precision of generals, but the bitterness of betrayed lovers. Custody battles, financial arrangements, arguments over titles and homes, every sordid detail was picked over by lawyers and dissected by the press. The dissection of their marriage became a macabre public spectacle. On July 15, 1996, the final documents were signed. By August 28, the divorce was irrevocable. Diana lost the title of Her Royal Highness, a calculated cruelty meant to remind her of her place. Yet she retained Princess of Wales, a lifeline to the people who never stopped loving her. The financial settlement was staggering: $22.5 million, an annual stipend for staff and charitable endeavors, continued residence at Kensington Palace, access to royal aircraft. Pieces of a royal life she no longer wanted but could never fully escape. For Charles, the divorce brought freedom, but not peace. He had untangled himself from a marriage long since hollowed out, but he remained imprisoned by public scorn. Diana's light, undimmed even in separation, continued to eclipse him. Within the palace, Charles brooded, surrounded by gilded walls and haunted by choices made and unmade. Somewhere along the winding corridors of his existence, he had traded love for legacy and found himself lonelier than ever. Outside, Diana lived like a supernova, brilliant, fierce, and dangerously free. She had been broken, but she had not been defeated. She turned survival into an art, shining bright even as she fought the sadness inside her. By the summer of 1997, it felt like both Diana and Charles were finding new paths. She chased new dreams. He tried to rebuild a future shaped by duty. But fate doesn't care about human hopes. It only takes one moment to change everything. Somewhere, deep inside the heart of a man who would one day be king, a final secret still awaited. A quiet apology, a lost love, and a letter written too late to change anything. But some things, once broken, can never be fixed. And soon the world would see just how deep the cracks had gone. A crash, a crown, and the weight of silence. August 31st, 1997. A date burned into memory like a scar that never fully heals. It happened fast, too fast for anyone to react. In the dim mouth of the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris, a car carrying Diana, Dodi Fayed, and their driver, Henri Paul, crashed at over 100 miles per hour. A twist of fate, a heartbeat stolen, 1,000 dreams shattered on cold concrete. The news detonated within Buckingham Palace. Diana, the people's princess, the rebellious spirit, the woman the world adored, was gone. Charles awoke to the sound of urgent voices and somber faces. Reality crashed through tradition with brutal force. He had to tell his sons, wake them from the last fragments of their childhood, and cast them into grief. No script, no titles, just a father delivering the unthinkable. The monarchy reeled, stunned and brittle. Across Britain, seas of flowers flooded the gates of Kensington Palace. Candles guttered in the late summer breeze. Sobbing strangers filled the streets, mourning not just a woman, but the fragile dream she had embodied, that grace could survive power, that goodness could coexist with crowns. And Charles? He was trapped. Balmoral's cold stone walls offered no comfort. Within them, he wrestled between private devastation and public duty. Questions erupted like wildfire. Why no flag at half-mast? Why no statement? Why such chilling silence from the royal family? Centuries of rigid protocol paralyzed the monarchy at the very moment humanity demanded action. But Charles understood. He knew instinctively that tradition would not save them this time. He pleaded. He pushed against walls built by generations. Diana deserved more than whispered condolences behind palace doors. She deserved the full weight of mourning. Finally, slowly, Buckingham Palace yielded. The Union Jack was lowered. The Queen spoke to the nation. And the royal family, so often distant and untouchable, walked among their people, touching hands, bowing heads, receiving grief like absolution. On September 6, 1997, the world held its breath. Westminster Abbey overflowed with black-clad mourners. Leaders and celebrities stood shoulder to shoulder with common citizens. Elton John sang "Candle in the Wind," reshaped into an anthem of loss. Every note is a wound, every word is a farewell. Charles walked behind Diana's coffin, flanked by William and Harry. 3 figures cloaked in black paraded before millions. Each step is a burden heavier than the last. Each breath is a reminder that even princes are not spared from the cruel whims of fate. The burial was private. Althorpe Estate, a secluded island on a quiet lake. Diana was laid to rest surrounded by the whispers of ancient trees, cradled by the land that had once cradled her youth. In her hands, a rosary from Mother Teresa. Around her, the hush of grief was too deep for cameras to capture. But outside, the storm raged on. In the days and weeks that followed, the monarchy faced a reckoning unlike any in living memory. Newspapers thundered with accusations, television screens flickered with outrage. Public faith in the royal family plummeted. The firm, that polished machine of protocol and pageantry, was exposed as fragile, human, and deeply fallible. Charles bore the heaviest weight of all. He had failed Diana in life, in love, in loyalty. No carefully worded statement could erase it. No public gesture could cleanse it. It was etched into every bouquet left at the palace gates, every candle burning in silent vigil. The guilt did not come in a single crashing wave. It seeped in like rain through cracks in stone, quiet, relentless, inevitable. Within the shadowed halls of Windsor Castle, behind the ornate gates of Clarence House, Charles withdrew. He grieved not just for Diana, but for the man he had lost somewhere along the corridors of obligation and fear, the man he might have been had he dared. He threw himself into duty, charities, tours, speeches. His calendar became a fortress against memory. Every handshake, every ribbon cut, a small defiance against the haunting pull of regret. But grief is patient. It waits in silence. It clings to uniforms and seeps into state dinners. It lives in the corners of coronation halls and the quiet moments between applause. In stolen seconds, Charles could still see her, the girl with the tilted smile, the woman who laughed too loudly, who danced barefoot when no one was watching. The rebel he couldn't hold and never truly understood. Time did not heal. It only taught him to wear his masks better. When he married Camilla Parker Bowles in 2005, the world watched with narrowed, weary eyes. There was no fairy tale this time, no illusion of innocence, just two battered souls choosing each other after too many years lost. The ceremony was modest, a civil service in Windsor Guildhall, 28 guests, no cathedral, no golden carriage, just quiet vows between survivors of their own history. Camilla wore feathers, not a tiara, smiles, not diamonds. Theirs was not a love story spun for legends. It was something simpler, rougher, real. But Diana's ghost remained. In every public walkabout, in every clumsy interview, in every flicker of comparison between the princess who captured hearts and the duchess who faded into the background. Charles loved Camilla, of that there was no doubt, but love wears many faces. Some love comfort, some loves heal, and some love haunts. Diana was the haunting kind. Charles knew it in the hollow moments between duty and ceremony. Knew it when he saw her smile echoed in William's easy charm, in Harry's defiant spark. Knew it in the way the world still spoke her name with reverence he could never command for himself. The real tragedy had never been the scandal, nor the divorce, nor even the cold fury of public humiliation. It was simpler than all of that. It was that somewhere, amid the gilded cages of monarchy and the whispered lies of tradition, he had lost the one person who had seen him, truly seen him, and loved him, not for the crown he wore, but for the boy he had been beneath it. And that kind of love comes only once. It leaves a scar no coronation can cover, and even kings must learn to live with the weight of it. A throne earned, a heart left behind. When Queen Elizabeth II passed, the crown finally found its way to Charles. 73 years old, and at last, he was no longer the prince in waiting. He was King Charles III. A title he had been groomed for, had waited for, had both longed for and dreaded. Yet, when it arrived, it felt less like a triumph and more like an elegy. Titles are tricky things. They shine brightly from afar, but sound hollow when your heart still beats in time with ghosts. The world reacted with a muted cheer, polite but restrained. Change, even after 70 years, unsettles. Some welcomed him with cautious optimism, some clung to tradition, and many, far too many, whispered another name, Diana's, like a quiet rebellion, as if loyalty to her memory was an act of defiance against the institution that had once hurt her. Charles smiled for the cameras. He waved, gave speeches about unity, about renewal, about dreams of a modern monarchy. But behind the measured smiles, behind the practiced cadence of his words, there lingered a rawness that no crown could conceal. It lived in the corners of his eyes, in the heavy stillness of his shoulders. He was not the boy who had fallen for Diana's shy laughter, nor the man who had betrayed her innocence. He had become something harder, sadder, a figure worn thin by the relentless machinery of royal duty and personal regret. The truth of his heart did not explode into the world with grand declarations. It escaped instead in quiet fragments, whispers to trusted friends, candid slips in interviews, rare moments where the burden grew too heavy to guard. In those moments, the admission surfaced. The love of his life had not been the throne, nor the service, nor even survival itself. It had been her, Diana, not the mythologized Diana of statues and tabloids, not the icon draped in sorrow and roses, but the girl who laughed with abandon, the woman who defied tradition with a wounded smile, the soul who loved him imperfectly but fiercely and whom he had let slip away. Charles did not waste energy wishing to undo time. He understood the futility. Even armed with hindsight, he knew he might have made the same choices, trapped by fear, by duty, by the crushing weight of what must be done. Yet understanding brought no relief. In the quiet spaces between ceremonies, Charles wandered the familiar halls of Balmoral, Sandringham, Windsor. Each corner held memories soaked into the stones, glimpses of a life that had once been filled with hope. He found himself pausing by windows where Diana's laughter had once echoed, walking paths where they had once stood, two young souls pretending they could bend history to their will. Sometimes he wondered whether they had ever truly known each other, whether Diana had ever seen the boy he was beneath the armor of expectation, whether he had ever really seen the girl she was, not the role he needed her to fill. They were two comets, bright, brilliant, but destined to blaze past one another, never quite able to change their courses. Camilla stood by him now, steady and sure, a partner, a refuge. He loved her with the worn-out gratitude of a man who had survived his own legend. Yet it was a different love, a gentler, quieter thing, a shelter, not a fire. Some loves blaze through your veins, consuming everything in their path. Some love to build walls against the storms, and some loves, once lost, carve a hollow so deep no future joy can ever fully fill it. In his heart, Charles carried a ledger, a private accounting of victories and defeats, of triumphs recorded in history books and wounds known only to himself. Near the top of that ledger, in ink that refused to fade, was her name. Not the canonized Diana adored by millions, but the real woman, messy, vulnerable, imperfect. Beautiful not because she was untouchable, but because she was painfully, gloriously human. At 76, Charles finally stopped fighting that truth. No longer at war with memory, he surrendered to it. The final, quiet confession slipped past the barriers built by decades of tradition. He had loved her, and he had lost her, and no title, no throne, no empire of ceremony could ever change that. Their undoing had never been just one affair, one cruel word, one act of betrayal. It was the slow, grinding tragedy of two souls caught in a world too small, too rigid for the wild, clumsy, breathtaking imperfection of real love, a world that demanded images instead of intimacy, legends instead of humanity. Real love does not fit neatly into crowns and coronation halls. It stumbles, it bleeds, it forgives and wounds in equal measure. Charles wore the crown now, the culmination of a lifetime of waiting. The royal standard flew above Buckingham Palace, history bent to record his reign. But inside, there were no parades echoing through his heart, no trumpets announcing the fulfillment of destiny, only silence. In that silence lived the memory of a girl he had once loved, a girl whose laughter he still heard in unguarded moments, a woman whose absence filled rooms more completely than any presence ever could. The greatest treasure he ever had was not a kingdom, nor the centuries of tradition now resting on his shoulders. It was a fleeting, fragile, all too human love, the kind that kings are never taught how to keep. In the twilight of his reign, as time pressed closer and history cast its long, cold shadow, Charles carried with him not just the weight of a kingdom, but the heavier burden of remembrance, a truth stitched invisibly into every royal robe, hidden beneath every gilded crown, that even kings must mourn the loves they could not hold and live with the echoes of what they lost. When the last anthem fades, when the last portrait is hung, when the final page of history turns, it will not be the crown that endures. It will be the memory of the girl he loved, of the life that might have been. What if King Charles's true love was never meant to survive the weight of the crown? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories hidden behind royal walls.